Okay, so, I think we've made improvements every year. And it's not like you turn a light switch on and off and it changes. So I think the concerns are fair and the sentiments are fair. And, to be fair, they had no idea what the numbers were going to, our first year in office, as you know, the revenue numbers, we accounted for about 200,000 and collected 800,000. So, it's a process, and I certainly welcome the support of the city of Rye in terms of helping to manage this process. I certainly welcome the support in terms of, the last thing we want to do is have uninsurance costs of $52,000. And if there's a way to manage it, and, move away from self-insurance, that's fine. So I think that last year we spent the bulk of the year and at this commission discussing the whole idea about how many parking spaces, recapturing the park, and that kind of thing. So, I think that yes, clearly the numbers this year are disappointing, but certainly open to any commission suggestions on how we improve the operations of the park. But I don't, I don't want to leave the impression that nothing's been done for the last several years.
Well, but that's what makes it even more frustrating, because from a revenue point of view, we had a record year. We had the most revenue ever for the Ryetown Park in 2010. We made $985,000, and I think that's thanks to a lot of the policies that we did implement as far as increasing the parking rates and the beach rates.
In all due respect,
And good weather.
because you had 21 extra days. It wasn't because,
Well,
it wasn't, if anything, you would have more revenue if you hadn't implemented policies. And let's not lose sight of the forest for the trees.
well, but yet,
If you would have had additional 250 parking spaces, and I agree we shouldn't have had them, and I agree with the view that we wanted them more green, but, we didn't get additional revenue because of the new tariff policy. We got it because we had 20 more sunny days. You had unbelievable spectacular, which is exactly why I think we really need to focus on expenditures, because we're really going to be vulnerable this year. If we lost $142,000 this year in a terrific weather year, if you get any kind of difficult weather, we're going to be
Exactly.
very problematic.
that's exactly my next point, because if we had a banner year at $985K in 2010, and we were told all year long, well, it's because you're having a great weather year. It's not because of the policies you implemented. It's because of the great weather year. And on top of that, staff feels that people are actually not coming to the park towards the end of the year because they don't like the high rates and they figured it out. Well, if those two things are true, why then does the 2011 budget actually project an increase in about $65,000 to the revenue? We should actually be decreasing the revenue projections.
I explained that in my note here. Look, I just want to point out that these are cause and effect types of numbers. The fact that we had 21 extra days of operation, well, if it rained on those days, those employees would not have come to work and they would not have gotten paid. So your labor costs would have gone down. We feel that what happened here is that the daily average, if you will, of attendees and daily average revenue kept on sliding as the year went on, but we stayed open. And we had to pay those people even though we were getting less revenue on average per day. And that's, again, the fault of the good weather was great, and the gross went up, but because of the extra operating hours that we had, our expenses went up. And underneath that, I read that the model is still not quite right. Because the model, if it were right, as you increased your revenue, your expenses would increase proportionately, and whatever you projected would work. In theory, that's the way it should happen. So something is wrong in the model for us to have increased revenue and yet have labor costs increase beyond the revenue.
Anticipated expenses is what the problem is.
Yeah.
Yeah, and Supervisor Carvin, tremendous strides have been made in the last 3 years, and I think the commission and two government model has to change somehow, because to me, everyone's working hard, and we're trying to coordinate, and we're getting the numbers, but for some reason, you have a commission that's shaping policy on top of two governments, that there's got to be a business manager in the mix somewhere that's accountable to tracking these numbers. And to me, it's not that we ran over necessarily the 50,000 because of nice weather. It's the interest charge and the unemployment insurance of $65,000 total, that now we're double the loss that we thought we were. And that's what I want to avoid. Get to a monthly accounting system, have better coordination between the two municipalities. So everyone's doing a good job given the structure we're in.
Right.
I think we're going to have to make some structural change. And it's not the park manager, and it's not the program manager. It's a business manager that's going to look at this for all year.
Yeah, well, I think that's right. I mean, look, it won't come as a surprise to anybody here. We've also, as Mayor Feinstein knows, participated. We've taken down a $50,000 grant to eliminate the town of Rye altogether. And so if that were to happen, then clearly that will have an impact on the commission. One of the things that will need to be studied as part of that study is, and I think we're completely open to examining ways to reduce cost and make the park management much more efficient. And we're certainly open to any suggestions we have. And as I said, we have a more fundamental analysis going on at the town level in any case.
I really think these are great questions that we're raising, and I agree that even though there's a frustration at this side and of everyone else, and Bishop, you've articulated that as well, because I think we have made tremendous strides. The reduction of the parking spaces, I even think the revenue that we charged, we really did spend a lot of time thinking about this, and I think we're much better off, and even the way the park is being managed is much better off. The question is, how do we tweak things to even make it better?
Well, actually, quite frankly...
And policy, we really have spent a lot of time. And so, yeah, there's a loss. And, of course, we're the frustration level because we didn't know. And, of course, I understand Mayor French because you have to absorb about half of that. And you've just started your new budget. But I don't want to be critical. I just want to say that we're here because we're making such progress.
Well,
and how do we move it forward? And, I don't want it to be negative. I want to look at this as being positive.
Well, I think, actually, Mayor Feinstein, that's exactly right. And pulling this whole thing together, it's only this year that we had the numbers to begin to look at it.
Right.
And so,
That's right.
we only found out this year that it's 87% non-residents.
Right. We've made tremendous strides.
And so, and that's what I was trying to say. It's evolutionary. And quite frankly, I got to tell you, I'm very disappointed that in spite of the good weather, in spite of all the good policy, we are generating a loss. And I think the comments are absolutely fair. I think Mr. Nowotnik and myself are saying exactly the same thing. We need to really, and we're all saying the same thing, really, is we need to fundamentally study the model and see if the model works. And if it's not, as I said, we're perfectly prepared to do that, as evidenced by the fact that we're prepared to eliminate the town of Rye altogether. And certainly, the structural changes here that can make this more efficient, we're all for that.
So how are you addressing all this in the proposed budget?
Well, I want to jump to the passive park.
Well, hold on. I think we've got a logistical issue here tonight. We've got about 25 minutes before a new public meeting comes in.
Mm-hmm.
Secondly, Mayor French and I were talking earlier, I think, to try and, vote on the fees and all this before we get the RFP, at least in my view, is, well, it'd be an interesting exercise. It may be all thrown out the window anyway. So given that we have 25 minutes, I just really want to, go over some, but I don't want to go over a lot. I think that in terms of addressing the budget, again, the other thing is, I really would like to have, a team, whether the budget team or somebody else, take a hard look at maybe the subcommittee on the RFP, we'll get that on the 25th, right?
Yeah.
And in light of that, have either the budget committee or something really take a hard look at these expenditures and maybe come with some proposals next time about, the ways we can begin to think about improving the operating model and which I think is a longer term, but even on the expenditure side, I was talking to somebody today that used to run, what's the park down at the
Glen Island.
Glen Island.
Yeah.
And they're saying that, just looking at our part, there's a lot of things that they could do to do expenditures. I think the staff's done a fantastic job of taking us from where we were to where we are today, and implementing last year terrific, difficult circumstances, a real change. Now, the staff's never really been, asked to cut expenditures. That's not their fault. That's my fault, or that's our policy fault. They've never been asked to manage to expenditure level, as you pointed out, Mayor French. That's absolutely correct. I think the staff's done an absolutely fantastic job of responding to what we've asked them, and I think now we've got a different kind of ask, and I think we should really give some. So I think the budget then, the Commissioner's on it. I think to try and put a budget together tonight is not really feasible. I think what we ought to do is get the RFPs, think about maybe more longer-term changes to the operating model, and in the shorter term, once we have the RFPs, think about ways we can reduce costs. Maybe sit down with the staff and say, really, where can we cut? How much can we cut? Are there opportunities to cut? And I've got to believe that there are. We just got to think those through. Please, Terry. Not really.
Well,
I'm not confident that we've done it the way, we have, for example, it's easy, 2 people in the booth. Now, there's a fiduciary reason we have 2 people in the booth, right? We have 2 people in the booth really to make sure that, we don't lose, there's no slippage, leakage. Now, now you could, conceptually then you could reduce 1 person in the booth if you were more confident that there wasn't going to be any leakage. I think those are the kinds of things, just as simple off the top of my head.
Yeah, we did come up with a couple of the Budget Committee, Dennis Pillow, Mayor Pillow, myself, and Bishop sat down and came up with a bunch of recommendations. For example, September, do we need to be fully staffed in the month of September? Attendance really drops down, so that's a savings there. When you look at the scheduling of our staff, we have extended days where you're paying overtime or additional staff. Can we shorten the days to 8 hours? So the lifeguards are off duty at 5 p.m., for example. That's a savings there. Can we get out of the unemployment business? So we came up with pretty quickly $100,000, and I think the conversation you and I had today is, all right, that's the easy stuff. Can we double that and be a little more aggressive and pull back on some of our staffing? Maybe we were overstaffed in certain positions at certain points in time on the grounds, and really get down, because at the end of the day, when you look at it, we're spending over $1 million to really run a 3-month beach, and that's a lot of money for what the objective is. So, is there a way to pull back on the expenses to the tune of $100,000 to $200,000? I don't think we make those decisions tonight, but part of what you're going to do is start to put forth those recommendations, some of which are in here tonight. And the second thing I'd like to do, though, so we've got those cost-saving initiatives, is to have the accountant sit down with our controller in the City of Rye and actually go through the numbers and explain.
Set up a meeting.
Explain all of this detail as to why these things come about and the flow. And maybe there are some savings, like lifeguard hiring, where we're not paying unemployment for our lifeguards, and maybe we hire a service to do that for us. Could that be an extension for the beach? Well, we have a service. They hire lifeguards for the beach. They hire lifeguards for the pool. Just an idea. I mean, those types of things.
Yeah.
Not a single by the way, not a single lifeguard filed for unemployment.
Well, but you do have it in the other positions.
It's the other job categories.
Right. So maybe that's a similar type of thing. It's a similar type of approach.
Mayor Feinstein.
I understand that we have to hone in on the expenditures, and there's more dialogue that needs to take place. But when we adopt a budget, we're adopting not only expenditures, but also we're making an estimation as far as the revenue. And I still think we haven't had a meeting since November, and we talked a little bit about a policy determination on the revenue side. Last year, or I should say 2010, was a transition year. It was an experimental year, and we always use the word experimental, that we would tweak. But I think that, I don't know if we've ever really came to a decision whether or not we're keeping the revenue, if we all feel comfortable keeping the categories the way they were, and then bringing back the non-resident permits. I think we should really talk about that quickly this evening, because that will impact the budget. So I think we should talk about the revenue, even if we can't come up with expenditures, but we really need to finalize the revenue structure a little bit.
Well, I think we can discuss it.
I think we have to discuss it,
that makes
because
sense,
we won't be able to, because if we have changes to it, I think we need to know that before we finalize the budget, let's say, at the next meeting.
Well, that's why I wanted to really